There was brain matter all over the window. Inside the car on the driver's side, there were bullet holes. It was blood everywhere. There was flesh in some of the bullet holes. Hey guys, Angela here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for stopping by. Please make sure you stick around until the end of the video just to see if you like it here, and if you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, leave a like. You can even leave a comment. We can get to know each other down there in the comment section. If you're returning and you are subscribed, thank you so much for subscribing to my channel and returning to watch another video. If you're returning and you haven't subscribed yet, we've been through this. We know you like it here, so you may as well hit that subscribe button as well. Today's video is going to be a story time video. I am doing a follow-up to a TikTok series that I started. If you don't follow me on TikTok, make sure that you head over and follow me there. I'll put my TikTok handle on the screen. I decided that I was going to share the story of my mom's murder and my quest to try to figure out as much detail about what happened to her that night as I possibly could. And the reason why I decided to do that is because those of you who follow me here on YouTube, if you watch my vlogs, then you saw that I was reading a book called Memorial Drive by Natasha Trethewey. And the book was about her mom's murder. She was killed by her ex-husband, which is really similar to the way that my mom was killed. She was killed supposedly, according to police documents, in a drive-by shooting. Me and my family had always had the thought that she was killed by her boyfriend, and the drive-by shooting was a cover-up for her murder. So there were similarities between Natasha's story and my story there. And then as I read the book, there were a lot of similarities between how Natasha reacted to her mom's murder, like her emotion behind it, how she dealt with it throughout her life. And then 20 years after her mom was killed, she was able to obtain the records of the court trial, and she was able to read through all of the witness statements and police reports, and see evidence, see the crime scene and things like that. And in the book, she said that that was sort of like the last point, like the turning point of her sort of not necessarily healing from the trauma, because if you've ever lost a parent or just anybody close to you, you know that the grief never ends. You just figure out a way to deal with it, and you deal with it differently depending on what's going on in your life. But she said something that was very profound to me, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the book in front of me, but she said you can't get over trauma until you can tell a story about it. And so that prompted me to maybe try to obtain any police records or documentations or anything around the night that my mom passed away, so that I can piece together that last little bit of what maybe happened to her on the night that she was killed, because I had such a strong recollection of my last memory of her. I was the last person to see her alive, the last person to have a conversation with her before she left out and never returned, and I sort of wanted to piece the rest of that night together. So I got on TikTok and I told the story about the night my mom was killed and my last interaction with her, and my experience at the hospital and all of that stuff. And I was 100% firmly sure in the story that I told. This is the same story that I've been telling for the last 24 years. My mom was killed July 18th, 1997. So it has been 24 years as of last week, and this is the same story. This is what I remember. This is my recollection, and it got a lot of attention on TikTok. It went viral. I got a lot of followers from it, and I promised to keep everybody updated on what I find out from the police records and all of these things. And in that, I decided that I was going to include my two sisters that were also home the night that our mom was killed with me, and my aunt, in my quest to figure out what happened to my mom that night. And that's where it gets interesting. So for the sake of the YouTube video, I'm going to tell you the story as I told it on TikTok, as I've told it for the last 24 years, as I remember it. And then I'm going to tell you what happened after I talked to my sisters and my aunt. So as I said, my mom was killed on July 18th, 1997. I was 13 years old. As I remember it, it was about midnight, maybe a little bit before midnight. I was home watching TV, which was against the rules. I was supposed to be asleep, but my mom worked overnight at a nursing home. So usually when she left for work, I would turn the TV on and you know, just watch whatever. For whatever reason, that night she came home early, so she came home at around midnight, as I said, maybe a little bit earlier, and I was watching TV. I was surprised when she came home. I was caught, and I remember being yelled at for being awake and watching TV so late. My mom was upset about something, and she was not in a good mood, and you know, I asked her what was wrong with her, and she basically said that her boyfriend didn't come and pick her up for work, and that she was going to get her car from him because he had her car. And I asked her, you know, how was she going to get there, and she said she was going to walk, and because it was so late, I offered to walk with her. He didn't live far, but he lived too far for her to be walking on her own, so I offered to walk with her, and she declined. We had this short interaction, and then she left, and I stood in the door and just watched her until I couldn't see her anymore, and then I sat back down and watched TV because that was Angela. Maybe an hour and a half later, there was a knock at the door. It was a woman who said that she was my mom's coworker and that my mom had gotten sick at work, and she was there to let us know that she had gotten sick, but she was okay. And I immediately said that that wasn't true because my mom had just left. She didn't actually go to work because her boyfriend didn't pick her up, and that she was gone to get her car. And the lady sort of stopped in her tracks, said she'd be back, and just walked down the stairs and never returned. And you know, I thought it was sort of strange, but I didn't think much of it. I was 13. I didn't wake my sister up or anything like that. And so I went back to watching TV, and then maybe 45 minutes or so after that, there was another knock at the door. It was my boyfriend's mom, and she had told me that my mom had been shot and she was there to take us to the hospital. That's when I woke my sister up. I guess I should know that my other two sisters were there with me. One of my older sisters, who is about 2.5 years older than I am, so she had just turned 16 at the time. I was 13, and then my 7-year-old sister was there as well. So at that point, I woke my sister up because I was really confused about what was going on. My older sister got us dressed. We got in the car with her boyfriend's mom, and on the way to the hospital, we were in the back seat and we were having a conversation, my older sister and I, and she was saying, you know, I hope maybe she just got shot in her leg and she's okay. And you know, I look at her and I say, you know, well, but what if she's dead? And as we're having this conversation amongst each other, because at this point my sister is kind of reprimanding me for saying something like that, I'm looking at his mom through the rearview mirror, and she looks really nervous and uncomfortable, and you know, something just didn't seem right. So we arrive at the hospital, and when we pull up, my mom's car is in the emergency entrance of the hospital, and my sister and I jump out of the car and we walk up to it. The doors are open, and I knew in that moment that my mom had passed away. I think we both knew in that moment that our mom had passed away. There was a bullet hole through the front window, right in front of the passenger side. There was brain matter all over the window. Inside the car on the driver's side, there were bullet holes. It was blood everywhere. There was flesh in some of the bullet holes. And so, you know, we looked at the car for a little bit. I should mention that her boyfriend's mom pulled off and left after we got out of the car. She didn't go into the hospital with us or anything like that. And once we got into the hospital, we went into the waiting room, and it was a bunch of people in the waiting room, and you could hear people saying, those are her children, those are her children. And then we were called back to a room by the doctors, and on our way to the room, I saw a nurse walking with a bag, and in the bag was the clothes that my mom was wearing, her scrubs, and the bag was really bloody, and at the bottom of the bag there were these rings that my mom would wear every day. And I knew in that moment that my mom had passed away, right? Because the bag was like, it was filled with blood and bloody clothes. And we go to the back room, and the doctor tell us that they did everything that they could, and our mom didn't make it. And they asked us if we wanted to identify the body, and I said yes, and my older sister said no. We needed to call adults, and at that point we called adults, and you know, they took over from there. Some of the other things that I mentioned in my story on TikTok is that there were 2 other people that were shot in this drive-by shooting. My mom's boyfriend was also supposedly in the car. He didn't get shot at all, but there were 2 other people that did get shot. They had flesh wounds. They were fine. They did not pass away. And they did not cooperate with the police in any way, shape, or form. And we didn't know who they were. They kind of disappeared, and that was that. And that is the story that I have been telling for the last 24 years. That is exactly as I remember it happening. And you couldn't have told me that wasn't 100% accurate until I pulled my sisters and my aunt into what I was trying to do as far as like obtaining police records, trying to piece together what happened to my mom that night. So this is where the update comes in for those of you who are coming over from TikTok. So I originally started off by talking to my younger sister, just sort of telling her my plans and what I was trying to do in regarding to our mom's murder. And so we started talking about the night that my mom passed away in more depth than we ever have. My sisters and I have just never had that conversation in 24 years. We've just never talked about that night in depth. And so my little sister, as I said, was really young. She was 7 years old when my mom passed away. So she doesn't have a lot of memories of our mom as is. And so I spend a lot of time like telling her stories about our mom, telling her stories about like us growing up and things like that, just to sort of give her some insight into who our mom was and how she was when she was growing up. So she doesn't have a lot of childhood memories of herself either. So we're talking and I start to recall the night that our mom had passed away, and she started to interject with memories of her own. And she remembered our brother being there that night, and she remembered being awake. And I'm like, no, you were asleep and I was the only one awake, and it was just you, me, and our other sister. And she's like, I could swear that one of our brothers was there and some other things. And I'm like, I don't know, I really didn't want to refute memories because she has so little as it is, and I didn't want to say no, you're wrong, but that's just not how I remembered it. So then we called my aunt. She wasn't there, but we called her and we were talking through the night with her. And then we got to a point with our aunt in the conversation where we're like, well, who identified the body? Because they wouldn't have told y'all like that your mom was dead if they weren't sure that it was your actual mom. Somebody had to identify the body. If y'all were the first people there and y'all didn't identify the body, then that means that somebody like that's not usually how that works. So then we got confused. So then we brought my older sister in to try to get some clarity on that. And my sister confirmed our mom went into the hospital as a Jane Doe. I did mention this in the story, but after my mom was shot, her boyfriend drove her to the hospital and just left her there, and she was a Jane Doe. That's why her car was just in the emergency entrance of the hospital. And apparently his mom went back after he just dropped her there, identified her body, and then left. But I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So after my sister told us that his mom was actually the person that identified the body, I'm like, I'm confused. I don't remember that happening. And so my sister started to tell me the story of what happened, and it wasn't completely different than what I remember, but it's not how I remembered it at all. And I immediately got emotional. I don't think that my sisters and my aunt have ever seen me or heard me cry in the way that I cried, because in that moment I realized that I must have been going through some sort of like detachment or disassociation from what happened. I don't know. I don't want to diagnose myself, but for some reason I remembered the story different than it actually happened, and I have been remembering that night differently for the last 24 years. So as the story goes, per my sister, and I'm inclined to believe that this is actually how it happened because my little sister, who was 7 years old, as I said at that time, had some of the same recollection as my older sister. So I am the one that is misremembering here, not my sisters. I am inclined to believe that. But as the story goes, per my sisters, it was about midnight when our mom came home. She was actually dropped off by one of her other co-workers who we do know very well. She lived in our neighborhood, so we do know her very well. And I was not the only one awake. My sisters were also awake. So all three of us were up. It was just the three of us home at that time. I was watching TV. I was watching The Three Stooges per my sister's memory. Our mom came home. She was very upset, and she was upset over her car, but she was upset because she had given her boyfriend money to put her car in the shop, and she had got word that he was riding around in the city in her car instead of having taken it to the shop like he was supposed to. So she left work in order to take her car away from him. She did plan on walking to his mom's house from our house, and my older sister said that she felt a little weird about it. At the time, my older sister was about 8 months pregnant, so she said that she faked like she was having some contractions, and she asked my mom if she could lay down with her for a little bit, and my mom obliged, and she laid down with her, and they fell asleep. So my older sister, and my mom, my older sister, and my little sister fell asleep in the back room, and that's when I was up in the front room watching the TV by myself. And then my mom woke up while my sisters were still asleep, and decided to go on the walk to get her car. And that's when we had that last interaction where she told me to cut the TV off, and go to bed, and she was gonna go get her car and she would be back. And I stood in the door and watched her up the street, and then I started back watching TV. My brother came home a little after our mom had left, which is why my little sister remembers my brother being there. And when he came home, he woke my sisters up. And then that's when my older sister asked where my mom was, and I said that she had left. So it was about an hour and a half later when there was a knock at the door, and it was a co-worker of my mom saying that my mom had been shot. Not that she had been sick. There was no person that came to the door and said that she was sick. It was a co-worker that we didn't know that came to the door and actually said that our mom had been shot, and she was there to take us to the hospital. And my brother was like, I just saw her walking, and I asked her if she wanted a ride, and she said no. And he said, are you sure? And she said, no, I'm fine. She wanted to walk. And he came home. And so when the lady was saying that our mom had been shot, he was saying, no, she's okay, I just saw her. And you know, that's when I was like, no, she just left. And you know, we were sort of kind of going back and forth with each other about our last encounters with her. And so my older sister and I went to the hospital, and my brother stayed home with my little sister. So she actually didn't go to the hospital with us. So it was the coworker that actually took us to the hospital, and it was just my older sister and I, and not actually my mom's boyfriend's mom that took us to the hospital. And my little sister was not with us when we got there. My recollection of our conversation in the car, and my mom's car being in the emergency entrance, and me and my sister having the conversation in the car and looking in the car, all of that stuff was pretty accurate. Us going into the emergency room and sitting in the waiting room and people whispering those are her children, that part was accurate. My sister also remembers that. And them calling us back into the room was also accurate. She remembers that. Where it differs once we got to the hospital from what I remember and what actually happened is when they called us back in the room, they did tell us that our mom had passed away, and they asked us if we wanted to see her body, not identify her body, which means her body had already been identified. And I said yes, and my sister said no, and that we needed to call adults. Also, apparently I didn't see a nurse walking with the bag. They actually came into the room with the bag of my mother's bloody clothes and offered them to us, and my sister said that we didn't want them, and that's how I saw the bag with her bloody clothes and her rings and things like that. And then we called adults in, and they took over from there. And we talked through some other things that I think will be more relevant once I get like police reports and things like that. But I just wanted to sort of give an update on the story that I told, because apparently it isn't as I remembered it, or isn't exactly as I remember it. And so I think that adds a little more nuance to this journey that I've come on, and that I've decided that I'm going to take people along with me. And I just have to say, excuse me, I just have to say that this part of the story was a lot more difficult to tell than the original story because I started this journey because I wanted to complete a story, and I find myself at the very beginning of a new one. And I don't have very many memories of my mom in the first place. I was 13, and so, you know, as the years have passed, things like even remembering her face, just remembering what she looked like, that type of stuff fades, which is why I keep pictures and things like that of her in my phone, just to sort of remind me of what she looks like. Also, I don't, you know a lot about my mom personally, because we grew up in a household where your mom was your mom and not your friend. We didn't have very many conversations about who she was, what she liked, you know, those types of things. And also, my mom and I was just sort of in a weird place in our relationship. I was a teenager, you know, I had some angst going on, but also my relationship with my mom had drastically changed because she had started making some lifestyle choices that I wasn't used to, one of them being the boyfriend. And so our relationship had sort of, you know, not been as it had before, and I was sort of struggling with that. And so I don't know, I feel like maybe that's why I created this version of the story where I had this last moment with her. It wasn't sweet, but it was my moment with her, of my own, and that's no more. So as I said, I'm struggling a little bit with finding myself at the beginning of a story and not wrapping one up, if that makes sense. And I did do like a brief follow-up on TikTok where I mentioned that I had immediately after the conversation with my sister started looking up therapists to possibly talk to, because if I'm being quite honest, I'm sort of struggling with it. I've been struggling with it for like the last week, just, you know, trying to understand why I remembered it the way that I remembered, and sort of grieving the loss of that little last moment that I remember having with my mom. I also forgot to mention that I actually do know the two people that were shot in the incident with my mom. I'm still adamant about going forward with, you know, obtaining police records and trying to figure out what happened to my mom that night. And I am 100% going to try to find these people and ask. But just, you know, knowing that there are people out there that could give me the story as is and they just haven't. And then also one last thing that I forgot to mention that I remember differently is the autopsy. Because according to my sister, my mom was actually shot in the back of the head at point blank range and not in the front of the head at point blank range per the autopsy. And she was actually shot in the back first. The gunshot to the head is what killed her, but she was not shot in the head first and then subsequently shot. She was shot in the back and then shot in the head, and the shot in the head is what killed her. And so even as early as 2 years ago, I'm still detaching from actual details, and I just don't understand why. Because here's the thing, I'm the type of person where I don't forget anything. I am very anal about remembering the details of stuff, and I feel like it's a trauma response to having grown up defending my experiences, particularly as it relates to my relationship with my mom prior to her death and experiences in my childhood after her death. I've spent a large portion of my life defending that. As a way to combat that, I have built up this system of remembering every single thing that happens to me in every avenue of my life so that people can't refute my experiences because I know them so well. And so having learned that I misremembered that night, it's not sitting well with me. So I just wanted to share that update with you all because I promised that I was going to take you along, and I am going to continue to do that. It is really therapeutic for me. I don't share like this often, not just online, just period. My best friend, she keeps saying, God, I'm so happy to see you open up in this way. I'm so happy to see you open up in this way. And it's new to me. And honestly, I had so much trepidation around sharing, but when I say the response was overwhelmingly positive, the comments were overwhelmingly positive, people were invested, people were giving suggestions on what to do, it really does and did feel like a safe space, and I'm really, really glad that I did it. It also prompted me to have a conversation with my sisters that I just never had, and although it hurts and I'm confused, I'm happy to know what actually happened, because here's the thing, when my sister was telling the story, it all sort of came back to me like Raven style, and That's So Raven, where it just all the memories start just like rushing back to my head in the actual way that they happened. And so if not for anything, I'm happy that I told the story so I can start remembering things as it happened and addressing the trauma that way. So anyway, I'm seeking therapy. I am still moving forward with trying to get police records and things. I am still going to, if there are people that I can find that are alive and that was there that night, or that has some insight, I am going to, I mean, all they can do is say no. All they can do is say, leave me the hell alone. I am moving ahead with trying to piece together what happened with my mom that night. I am determined to be able to tell a story of her. And yeah, I will keep you all posted. I'm probably mostly going to do that on TikTok though, in, you know, smaller increments as new information comes along, as opposed to on my YouTube channel. I just wanted to give this update in a longer format because it was a lot. And so again, I really appreciate all of you that came over from TikTok that are super invested. I will from now on continue the updates over there. For those of you who follow me on YouTube and you want to follow along with updates, then I suggest that you follow me over on TikTok. If you came from TikTok and you're also into style and lifestyle and blogs and things like that, have a look around. I'm not always crying on the internet. I'm here to show y'all how I spend my money, talk fashions, you know, talk lifestyle stuff. So stick around. If you like it, subscribe, and join me here as well. And I will talk to y'all in the next video or over on TikTok. Thank you all again so much for watching. Bye.